In this week's episode, Julie gives her first house tour of the season, and I think she's quite nervous.
Oop, that's the clock. That means I need to get to the tour now.
Then I head to the rewilding project, where I help remove some poisonous plants. So me with my bare hands and ragwort, I'm taking my life in my hands. And later, Julie goes shopping in our local town as we get ready for our first grand historic tour.
We're having 12 people come and stay in the house for 5 nights. All right, I'm looking outside and there's a huge group of people because they're waiting for me because I'm going to be giving a tour today, which is exciting because I want to inform sort of the people on the tour group a little bit more about Alberta Sturgis, who many of you know I'm doing my master's on. She's the subject of my master's in country house studies, and I want to start to bring her more into each of the tours here at Mapperton. The tour guide just said to me, she's excited to hear what I have to say about Alberta because she doesn't know that much about Alberta. Anyway, I better get out there. Oop, that's the clock. That means I need to get to the tour now. I'm very into the archives and in particular because of this lovely lady up there with gorgeous auburn hair. This is an Ambrose McAvoy painting and probably painted, we think, around sort of 1920, I think it was 1927 when that was painted. And her name is Alberta Sturgis. And what's rather extraordinary about Alberta is, yes, she's American. She came over during that period of Gilded Age. So between 1870 and 1910, 445 American heiresses came over and married into European aristocracy. Of the 445, 100 married into British aristocracy, and of the 100, 60 married firstborn sons, Alberta being one of them. So she eventually became the 9th Countess of Sandwich. She came over here, she was quite, I think, elderly actually during that period. She probably didn't want to be married. I think she probably wanted to become a nun or follow a path of sort of just service and singlehood. But her mother was very, very social and wanted to be accepted into European aristocracy. And so after 3 seasons, age 28, she did agree. First she said no, and then she said yes, then she said no, and then she finally said yes again to George Montagu's proposal, and they were married in July 1905. And it wasn't until 1916, when the 8th Earl of Sandwich died, that she then took on the title, the Countess of Sandwich. She was, of course, at that period, a fantastic writer. And the 3 people that she wrote to the most were her mother, her brother, and her aunt. And she wrote to them pretty much on a daily basis. And all 3 of them preceded her in death. And after their deaths, she asked for the letters that she wrote to them to be returned to her. So we have sort of this wonderful ping pong match to put together, but we have the puzzle. She was born in 1877, died in 1951, so she was 74 years old, but she did come from an incredibly wealthy family. So her grandfather, Solomon Sturgis, was unbelievably wealthy, banker, had a huge bank right in downtown Chicago, where I'm from, but it was burned in the Great Chicago Fire. However, if you've ever visited Chicago, has anybody visited Chicago? And do you know Buckingham Fountain, the great memorial Buckingham Fountain? It's one of the great her first cousin was Kate Buckingham, and her first cousin built that Buckingham Fountain in memory of her first cousin's brother, which would have been Alberta's other first cousin, and built it in memory and used Parisian architects. So for me, as a young girl, every year I'd go to downtown Chicago with my parents, and we would go to Buckingham Fountain. And through the archives, I've been able to uncover that it was her first cousin who kept writing to her saying, here's what's happening with the Buckingham Fountain works around it. So that's just my sort of little spiel about Alberta. And yeah, so hopefully we hope next year, if you come back, we'll be having an entire Alberta exhibition, because we know that there's so much more to uncover. And my last little nugget is that her mother definitely wanted her to be set up with Winston Churchill. And we have found a letter, and in that letter she writes to her mother saying, he's not pleasing to the eye. I really didn't enjoy sitting next to him at the dinner party, and it was a no-go. And further on, then we found a letter from one of her friends that wrote to Alberta, have you heard? Winston is engaged. I always thought he would marry somebody of sort of social esteem and a wealthy woman, and instead he's married somebody, according to her, penniless.
Today is focused on restoring nature at Mapperton, and we are in a really important site for that. This is the Gallops. It's a 40-acre field, and it used to be an arable field full of wheat and wonderful crops that were being grown to feed us. But today it's not doing that anymore. We've left it, and it's part of our Mapperton rewilding project. So what we're hoping is going to happen here is that there will be natural regeneration of wildflower species, that we're going to have insects coming back, and that the whole thing is going to be a hive of activity and good stuff for nature. And what's extraordinary is that I can already see that it is. We're only 1 year in, and we've just got tons of different plant species, not all of which are desirable. I'm going off now to meet Claire, who's with our team of volunteers, because they're doing a really important job, which is pulling ragwort. Now, ragwort is a yellow plant. It's quite nice to look at, and really it's a natural part of our botany, but it is poisonous for cattle and other animals. And because we've got adjacent farms here who really don't want ragwort, we're going to help by pulling it out so the seed doesn't get to them. I'm going to go see the team now.
The important thing here is to try and remove as many of the thistles as possible before they go to seed, because we're looking.
And why don't we want thistles? I mean, some of these thistles are absolutely magnificent.
I think
Look at that one there with its
Hazel,
purple flower.
Hazel identified that as a nodding thistle, and she said that's a really good one.
Yeah.
But we're going to focus on the boar thistles and any spear thistles that are here.
And why don't farmers like thistles?
Nothing will eat them.
Nothing will eat them.
And they do tend to take over. It's a bit like ragwort. So ragwort's poisonous to cattle and ponies. Sheep can eat it, but if we let the thistles and the ragwort go to seed, I don't think we'll have many neighbours as friends left.
And this is a rather controversial thing in rewilding circles, because some people will say, actually, you know, whilst in the early years you may find yourselves with a thistle and ragwort problem, if you just allow the ecology to evolve, eventually it'll take care of itself. Hazel, what is this extraordinary thing?
You know, you're asking me. It's for getting right under the roots and digging them up.
Right.
Much simpler than a spade. Here we go.
Look at that. Yeah. Okay. Right. And but spade works equally. Spade works equally well. And then there's good old-fashioned just pulling. And you've all got really good gear and gloves, and I, of course, have left mine behind. Claire's got a pair. But anyway, let's get cracking.
So it's really easy to pull up with the roots. When they're a year old, that's when they'll really take hold, and we might be able to find some bigger plants up here.
At this stage, we've got it early.
Yeah. So that one's going to flower.
This is nearly flowered, isn't it? The top.
And I think the problem with ragwort is if you get them when they are out in flower, they still set seed.
Right, so
and
it's too late. So
yes.
this was just in time.
Yes.
And the key thing with these is they're poisonous to livestock. That's why farmers don't like them.
Yeah.
Because they affect the liver of cattle and horses and
sheep can cope with them. No, but
yeah. It's really quite astonishing what's happening here.
Oh, I agree.
In its first year.
Yeah.
In terms of wildflowers.
If you compare the Gallops, I'm really pleased with the Gallops. If you compare the Gallops to somewhere like Cliff.
To Cliff, where it's just barren. It's like a Martian wasteland.
Which is why I didn't want to get this topped with a tractor, because I think there's too much Too much else going on in here.
So me with my bare hands and ragwort, I'm taking my life in my hands.
Would you like one of my gloves?
No, it's okay. I'll have to put up with having been so inadequately prepared. Here we've got the two different species of thistle, and this one is favoured. This is the nodding thistle, but it's rather splendid, an elegant plant, compared with the spear thistle, which is this one, with these very sharp spines and flowers pointing up. This one needs to be taken out, this one gets left. Chris has found a real treasure. This time it's not a plant, it's a fossil. And it's a rather beautiful specimen. If I bring it closer over here, you can see that it's part of what would have been an ammonite, but it's got very clear markings on it. Chris, well done. What are you going to do with it?
Frame it, put it in my office.
Put it in your office? Yeah.
In the editing suite.
Remind you of the passage of time. I've actually been having an amazing time. It's just so lovely to be out in this field. This used to be full of wheat, which of course we need to keep producing for food, but it also has a role to play in restoring our biodiversity. And it's just incredible how quickly things have come back. I mean, there are so many different types of plant species. There are 3 or 4 different types of thistle. I've seen wild oats. We've got corn poppies. We've obviously got ragwort, even though Claire doesn't want the ragwort. It's just really blossoming and coming to life. And we're going to be adding wildflower mix to this field as well over the coming year. So I think in future times, if you come to visit Mapperton, it's right by the drive. You're going to see this extraordinary rich field full, we hope, of insects and flowering plants.
As you can see, we are open to the public, and I did give my first tour of the season because I wanted to start to bring in a little bit more about Alberta. I was actually quite nervous when I did that tour, but I think it worked out really well. And here is the next tour lined up. And what's really exciting about this is when I see people outside the house, I think, great, they're visiting the house. But all this morning have been having a huge meeting with the whole Grand Historic Tour team. Now, if you don't know anything about Grand Historic Tours, do check out the link down below, because for the first time ever, we're having 12 people come and stay in the house for 5 nights, 6 days with Luke and I. We are your hosts. And it really is like a Grand Historic Tour. We've got an amazing butler, Dan. We have a housekeeper, Beryl, our chef, Joe, and she is incredible. And then, of course, we have Malcolm, who is our main interior designer here. Oh, and then we have Sam, of course. So Sam is like the official tour director on it. Do check out the schedule. We do have spaces available for April 2024, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Welcome to beautiful Bedminster. Clearly there's a festival going on here, but those of you coming on the Grand Historic Tours, you will be definitely coming to this very, very sweet, it's our closest town, if you like, and village, and really, really sweet shops. One of my favorite restaurants right there, Brassica. And Malcolm and I are heading to Sophie because she is the upholsterer that we use, and we just are getting, well, you'll see. It's kind of exciting. So Malcolm and I have been so busy today meetings in the house about Grand Historic Tours, then of course looking at Keeper's Cottage, and now we're sitting on a bench in the lovely square of Bedminster eating an arancini from Brassica, one of my favorite restaurants, delis, homeware shop, everything. So if you are coming on Grand Historic Tours, you're gonna visit it because it's lovely, but yum. So what size were we doing this one?
Just as they come.
Just as they come.
Just
Two of these?
Two.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
On the back.
With
this as the backing.
Yeah, lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay, great.